Here's the final key. Jesus said, if you want to be the greatest, if you want to be the biggest, if you want to be the largest, if you want to be a giant, then you must first become the smallest. So in order to be a giant, you got to first be willing to be little. Nobody in this arena would argue that the Apostle Paul was no doubt a giant in his generation. But before he was a giant, God told him, said, Saul, I'm going to have to change your name. I know you got a great future in the kingdom, but before you become a giant, I'm going to have to first change your name to Paul. And that's significant because the word Paul literally means little. So before you can become a giant, Paul, I'm going to have to first make you little. His name was Zacchaeus. His name was Zacchaeus, and the Bible teaches us that he was of little stature. And he heard that Jesus was coming by his way. And the Bible tells us that he could not see Jesus because he was too short. Everybody was bigger than he was. Every other church in town was bigger than his. But he had a desire to see Jesus. And in the distance, he saw a tree. And he ran and he shimmied up that tree. And that tree is what made the difference. That tree is what elevated him. That tree is what picked him up above his peers. That tree is what made him bigger. That tree is what made him larger. That tree is what made him a giant. That tree is what lifted him up. That tree is what took care of his small man syndrome. That tree is what took care of him being too short. That tree is what made him bigger than everybody else on the street. That tree is what made the difference. So Jesus could look up and go, Zacchaeus, today I go to your house. Today things change for you. The tree is what eliminated his inabilities and his shortcomings. No pun intended. 2,000 years ago, Jesus Christ died on a tree. And if you want to be a giant in this generation, you too have to have an experience with the tree. And if you're tired of just being the small man, if you're tired of not having a ministry, if you're tired of just barely getting by, if somebody can find the tree, if somebody can find a tree and begin to climb that old rugged tree, every head bowed and every eye closed with your hands raised up. If you're tired of being that little insignificant person, there's a tree in the arena tonight. If you'll climb that tree called Calvary, if you climb that tree called Calvary, if you climb that tree called Calvary, God will call you to preach tonight, young man. God will call you to the mission field, young lady. If you want to be a giant, you got to be willing to become small. You got to be willing to take up your cross.